think what's really unique about social media is the power to the people and the power to us. And so I really think a lot of that comes from stories that don't have 20 million views on YouTube, but that have 1,800 meaningful views. And so think about that and kind of be processing that. When we get to that point, I'll ask for some stories, and if you've got some, feel free to share. So I thought I would start off with this quote. RSS is dead. Blogs are dead. The web is dead. And this is one of my favorite marketing thinkers, Seth Godin. So I know that we're all in a hurry today, and so with that, I think we're done. In this blog post that Seth wrote last June, he was really describing what happens with artistic mediums, with journalism, with broadcast, and the idea that when a new technology emerges, people are very excited about it. And you have a lot of pioneers that go out and figure out how to use it. And they like the sexy factor of it. And essentially what Seth's saying here is, there's not really anything sexy and new about what's going on right now. There is the use of these technologies and the use of social media that is becoming more mainstay. It's not this thing that's, when you refer to Twitter and you misrefer to it as tweeter and a variety of different mispronunciations, it has that giggle factor to it. And that's what I think it is. When mediums begin to lose their giggle factor, they tend to become more a part of our lives. And so that's really the theme of what we're talking about. There's a lot of new stuff out there, but nothing's really changed. The fact that people connect on some basis, the fact that people are using new ways to communicate and new ways to connect through some of the tools that we'll talk about today, still comes back to the heart that when it gives you chill bumps when you watch something on YouTube, whether it's on your television, on your computer, or on your mobile device, it's creating that human connection. And so that really becomes the basis. So, neophiliacs beware. The Bookman coined this term, neophiliacs, in '69. And the idea was that a neophiliac is one that is highly stimulated by the new, bored with the old, always looking for something new. In fact, Wikipedia had some interesting bullet points that I just threw in. The ability to adapt readily to extreme change. The distaste or downright loathing of tradition, repetition, or routine. A tendency to become bored quickly with old things. A desire, bordering on obsession in some cases, to experience novelty. All of these bullet points describe what happens when you read the 2012 predictions for social media. It's all about this excitement about what's going to happen this year. Some major milestone is going to happen. And I hope to set the basis for what we're talking about back from all of the what's new, but what's really happening. So I'm going to start it from a personal standpoint. And this is not for my ego that I'm going to do this demonstration, but I joined Facebook in 2005. I was a young college student just in 2005, if you believe that or not. No, I wasn't young. I was actually in law school at the University of Tennessee, and I got in early, very early, before they made the public open. So these are all my profile pictures since that time. And it's kind of interesting, a few embarrassing photos. I'm sure I like to put my hand on my face a lot. I'm not sure what that's about, but and I try to be thin in them, but that doesn't always work. So we all do what we can. But oh yeah, and this was the person that you most look like, John Travolta. If I shaved, you'd get it. It's a big deal. But what I learned in that, I started out of law school with a real estate company, and I was working on marketing for them, and I really focused on lead generation. And I started to think about the way that people use the internet to find information. We live in a very unique region in East Tennessee where we have lots of people from all around the country that find this a great place to live. Especially in the northern area and in Florida, we have a lot of people looking to move out for taxation or risk of weather. whatever the case, they're looking for a more controlled climate, low taxation. And so I started blogging considerably in 2005 for the real estate developer that I worked with to try and boost my rankings in Google. And from that, we generated a lot of leads. We made a lot of conversations and connections with people all across the country that were trying to figure out about this little place called Knoxville, Tennessee, and what sort of quality of life that could be. And sure, you could buy an ad. You could say it's a great place to live. We could put a real catchy headline on it and make the phone ring. But we couldn't really engage them in that way. And so it was a very early time when people were just talking about search engine optimization. And just to set a little historical precedence for that and why that was important, in the late 90s, you could go to Yahoo, or you could go to Microsoft search engine at the time, and you would type in a query, and maybe on the 16th page you would find what you were looking for. And so what search became at that time was connecting people in a position of need with good quality, relevant information. And so we tried to flood that. We really used blogging to flood the internet with meaningful information and to try and make that connection. And so since 2005, 2006, I've written tens of thousands of tweets, which are not very meaningful, so I wouldn't go and read those. Thousands of Facebook status updates, hundreds of blog posts, hundreds of check-ins, photos, videos, all these things that we do and that we talk about. And then, of course, Pinterest, tens of pins now. And so there's not really anything new about what's coming out right now, but it's the way that it's changed that's so significant. And so with that, I went into a consultancy where I would talk to clients about, whatever their business line was. How do you connect with the people that care about your business? How do you connect with someone that wants to know about I'm trying to think. We have one client that started a blog that just works in manufacturing, and they remove condensation from large air containers, large air compressors. I mean, who wants to know about that? Somebody does. And that's the point, is that talking about these things in a relevant way to put information out there is really important. And so this is the very first presentation I gave about social media in 2008. And, just this hand sketch, this idea, you can approach social media by hanging a picture on a wall in a cocktail party and expect people to talk about it. Probably isn't going to get the results that you want. The second one's more of the traditional approach that we've had since the 40s of broadcast. We get our message out there, we communicate it loudly, we communicate it clearly, and we communicate it consistently, and we try to get people to adopt our way of thinking. And then the third is really the conversation. And that's really where we've entered into, since 2006, 7, and 8, we've really moved into the age of conversation. And we've had a lot of thinkers, we've had a lot of specialists and gurus, we hear this term, that really talk about what it means to be in conversation and to truly engage our audience. And so from that, I would tell clients, let's set up a blog. Let's get a Facebook page. Let's do these things, but let's do it strategically to figure out how to engage them. And so when I think about where we are today, and I was thinking about 2012, what's the really big thing this year? I think the really big thing this year is that we get it. When I started doing search engine optimization in consultancy, nobody really understood it, or nobody really wanted to invest the money that it necessarily took to get that. And now, if I were to ask any business owner in this room, what would you pay for a top rank on Google? I'm sure we could have a bidding war. And so the things that we were talking about 5 years ago are now a very big deal. And what we've been talking about in this age of conversation are now a very big deal. And they're becoming increasingly a big deal. I don't know if anyone's read this book. Glenn Reynolds, a professor over at UT Law School, wrote this book about the Army of Davids. He wrote it in March of 2006. And basically his premise is, we now have armed citizens with cannons in their pocket that can outperform CBS News, the New York Times, radio, all right here. and they're walking around with them in their pockets, ready to shoot that cannon at any time. Now, if we went back to 2011, I was talking to David Garner a few minutes ago about the idea that, 2011, would we have sat back and said, my prediction is that we're going to reach the Arab Spring and the collapse of the Middle East through social media? I don't think there would be one social media expert that would say that that was going to happen. But it did. In January 14th, Tunisia began its civil unrest, and we had that proliferated through this network, through Facebook, through Twitter, and then, of course, immediately following, Egypt. And uncertain how to deal with the proliferation of information, with people uniting and communicating, Egypt shut the networks down. But that didn't work. They continued to find alternative ways to connect. And at its core, have a conversation. A conversation about their dissatisfaction, a conversation about what needs to change, how things need to change. And that continued throughout the Middle East. Into Bahrain, Yemen, Syria, Libya. And as I look at these pictures, I think, how many people were united through one medium of conversation, or just this way that we got this word out that changed the fabric and the complexion of our Middle East. And then, of course, the 99%. They certainly use this as well. But this region right here used something that's been around forever, a conversation, but now it's a little bit different. And now it's allowed a conversation out there. And they did this with these and not these. And I think that's a very powerful statement. So now I want to take a minute to think about 2011. There were some. I always like to tell stories. I always think that's the most fascinating, the fascinating part of social media and the web as a whole. As far as what's going on, and I always try to refresh them a little bit. There's a few that are favorites of mine that I still may throw in, but I tried to come up with a few stories that are really interesting this year. And so let's start with Eat, Drink, and Be Merry. February 15th of last year, Gloria Huang was the social media worker with the American Red Cross. She was on a trip in Las Vegas. They were at a conference. Her and her boyfriend had a great time. They had been out after the conference was over, and they were getting some Dogfish Head beer. And Gloria's boyfriend happened to find 2 more 4-bottle packs of Dogfish Head's Midas Touch beer, and she wanted to tell all her friends. And through Hootsuite, an application that allows you to manage multiple Twitter accounts, she let the people know. All 344,000 followers of the American Red Cross. So that was a bit of a concern, and of course Gloria realized what was going on, and she posted immediately to her own Twitter account and talked about this rogue tweet that went out. And she put the hashtag Giddings Lizard. Okay? Well, American Red Cross had 2 things they could have done, and I know we have some PR professionals in the room, and they could probably analyze this for quite a long time as to what to do when 344,000 followers of a nonprofit organization think that you're out drinking beer. They had a good sense of humor about it. They said, we've deleted the tweet, and we're sober, and we've taken away the keys. But the story didn't stop there. Dogfish Head Beer really caught on to this, and they said, we're going to get engaged in this, and we're going to promote the Red Cross, and we're going to promote people to give blood. And the Red Cross reciprocated that and put up a web page on their own site telling people telling about Dogfish Head Beer. And what was really interesting after this, bar owners all across the country jumped on the bandwagon. Said, if you donate a pint of blood today, come on in tomorrow, maybe. and get your pint of beer. And they were giving away pints of beer to support the American Red Cross. Now, that's a great story about taking something that's potentially dangerous and making a really nice, heartfelt story out of it. I'll tell another one. In August 17th, Peter Shankman is a social media expert. He has over 100,000, or at the time had 100,000 followers on Twitter. And he was in the air and was on the Wi-Fi on the plane and sent this cute little tweet out. Hey Morton's, which happened to be his favorite steakhouse, can you meet me at the Newark airport with a porterhouse when I land in 2 hours? Okay, thanks. Now I probably would have said, okay, thanks, bye. That's sort of the, but anyway, he said, okay, thanks, smiley. Well, 2 hours later, he lands at the airport, and lo and behold, a Morton's representative, fully dressed in tuxedo, has his porterhouse. Now that happened in Newark, 100,000 followers saw it. What an incredible story. And I'd like to talk about a few good picks. I don't know if anybody saw this video. It was pretty widely spread in May of last year. And there were a few good pictures out there. She was flying in over Florida. She snapped the picture on her iPhone, and when she landed, she published it to TwitPic. And this picture was spread throughout the whole country. And all of a sudden, news media got very interested in it and wanted to publish this picture. And she said, look, I don't want any money for it. I'm not a photographer. But just, if you run the story, just mention me. And so Fox News, CNN began running this picture with no attribution on it. She's like, wait a second, I took the picture, it's my picture, I just wanted you to mention my name. But her name wasn't attached. And what happened, she didn't own the picture anymore. When she put that on TwitPic, it became TwitPic's intellectual property. And they could share that as they saw fit. And so there was a lot of question that occurred with that. What do we do in social media? What happens when we use these picture sharing services to share our most interesting information, or in some cases, most intimate information? And so Anthony Weiner used TwitPic to share private messages to someone else. And he didn't really realize that when he put it on TwitPic, it was actually available to the world. And it lost his career. So there were a few bad picks last year. So I'm going to get off that slide. So 2012, the Mayan calendar ends, and that's the end of my presentation. So Facebook, I'm just going to run through some quick numbers. There was anticipation in 2011 that Facebook would break the 1 billion mark. They didn't. They're at 800 million right now. I think they grew by 200 million people last year. That's a significant number. Although some people feel like it's not enough. I say 200 million people. That's pretty good. How about Twitter? Any guesses on how many people are on Twitter? Okay, that's a fake number. There are 362 million accounts as of the end of 2011. There's actually about somewhere between, different estimates say 100 million active users in the last 30 days. Some say 200 million in the last 30 days. I think it's probably closer to 100 million active users on Twitter. LinkedIn rings in at 160 million. And Shane can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I believe, drum roll, that Google Plus is now at 49 million. And that's a lot of people for a service that started in the summer of last year. And so I'm going to talk not in specifics about Google Plus, but in theory in just a second. So basically, that means everybody but that guy is on social media. 2/3 of internet users use one form of social media or another. And I think that's an interesting number. Okay, so since I've been in consulting with marketing since really 2008 and even before when I was working with a private company, every January is the year of mobile. Every year. But I do think that we've seen that a lot, and I think what we're seeing now, there's 5.6 billion mobile devices in the world. That's 81% of the world's population. That's a big number. And what this allows us to do is to be connected to our families. It allows us to keep in touch with people. It allows us to keep up with the latest news. It allows us to communicate through text message when we're in meetings. It allows us to unite for a cause. And it really is truly being realized as the pocket cannon that I talked about earlier. And with that, I want to go into, we used to have this idea of the 3 screens, or the 1-3-10 screens. The 1-foot view, the 3-foot view being your personal computer, and the 10-foot view being your television. And what we've seen over the last year or so and where we're entering is a total and complete confusion about screens. So now we watch Netflix on our iPads and our iPhones. We write blog posts on our phones. We interact with social media on our televisions, and no longer is it the idea that we have one location in which we interact with information. And this device will continue to dramatically change the way that we interact with everything. The Facebook stats, their mobile use is over half of the use on a daily basis with their site. Some people do not own a PC and have never logged into their Facebook account with their PC, only with their phone. And so it's a complete untethering to be able to do what we intend to do with our devices alone. And so we've been talking about, I think some of the pioneers, some of the neophiliacs out there have been talking about augmented reality for some time. But augmented reality cannot fully be cached until 4G technology really reaches a plateau in some point of ubiquity. The iPhones are still on a 3G service, but without getting all technical, what does that mean? 4G is very fast internet, a very big pipe of information coming into the phone, and it allows location-specific information, and it allows a lot of information to travel across. And an example of an augmented reality application would be going to Gettysburg and walking the battlefield and holding your phone up and being able to see the battle, and holding your phone up in specific locations on the battlefield and see the terrain as it was. And so you see a complete change about the way you deal with reality. And so this device has what they call Siri. It's a voice-controlled application. Xboxes and variety of devices at the house have this voice control where I no longer even have to touch anything. I can just talk and now say, take me here, or play this application, or whatever. And so the way we're interacting with information is changing dramatically. The way that we're interacting with our homes, some of these augmented reality apps allow you to look at your walls as very simply, what if I paint this wall red? What does it look like? And it does an overlay on top of it. Very, very powerful stuff. And especially with commerce, it really will have a huge impact on the way that we interact with our purchases. Now I can see what other people have said instead of just reading Amazon reviews. And so I think that's going to continue to become pretty big this year. To me, I think this is the most significant topic for this year. As social media plays an increasingly larger role in the search algorithm to the point that they will nearly be indistinguishable. And since 2008, this is something that's really been top of mind for me. Google, before rolling out Google+, had a variety of failed attempts. They had Google Wave, and there was a lesser known application that they ran out at that time called Social Circle. And Social Circle allowed people on Google, with Google accounts, to connect with one another and provide what they called personalized search. And so, you might have somebody say, hey, I just Googled pet stores in Knoxville and I saw, some results. And then somebody else Googles the same thing and they don't see the same results. And part of the explanation for that is that with personalized search, it starts to incorporate your network into your search results. There are trillions of pages of information on the web right now, and there is no way to provide the lucky hit results that Google used to give. Google was focused on giving the best results, and you could click the I'm feeling lucky, and 9 times out of 10 in the late 90s you would get a very accurate result. And that's simply not true anymore. And Google is now where Yahoo and Microsoft were, in my opinion, in the late 90s, where their search results just don't provide what I described earlier as far as having a person at a point of need and providing good, quality, relevant information to them. And so what Google has done in Google Plus has taken Social Circle and really made that the center of the application. And so Google Plus looks like a Facebook application with different privacy, with changes in one of its best features, in my opinion, and I'll defer to Shane. One of the best features, in my opinion, is the Hangouts and the video connections. I know a lot of businesses are using that for their single point of communication on business conversations and whatnot. But the most significant thing, your eye's not even on the ball, and that is when you type in a search query, if Chris has +1 something or Shane is +1 something and I'm connected with them, then all of a sudden those come up much higher in search results than they would otherwise. And what that starts to get at is the idea that my personal network can speak more relevance into me than a computer or a bot. And so that takes 2 forms. I mean, obviously you have the integration of all this information every time you're out there clicking like away, on pages saying, I like this, I like that, I +1 this, I did all this. You're feeding the machine in a way to provide better results for yourself in the future and provide better results for your social connection. Microsoft worked to deal with Facebook where they get all the information, so they're trying to provide this integrating social connections into their search results as well. This will continue to become a very important change for search algorithms to remain relevant. And so the other form of social search is just asking Twitter or asking Facebook, and you see this all the time. Hey, I'm looking for a pool guy. Hey, I'm looking for someone to seal my driveway. Any recommendations? And all of a sudden, your social network provides relevant information to you at a point in need. And so I think that's I think we're going to continue to see that grow. So this is a big debate. I think among especially all the experts and gurus that are out there, where are we? Do we curate content? Do we create content? And I think for every 2012 prediction that you read, people fall on one side or the other. And so what does that mean? In its simplest form, it means Pinterest. Pinterest is a great curation medium. It allows you to go through and organize things about your life. And you can say, I like this style of art, and I want to create essentially mood boards. I mean, in marketing and in design, we do this all the time when we're coming up and trying to convey the feel of a website or the feel of an advertising campaign. We create mood boards, and we take little snapshots and pictures from different aspects of our lives that aren't exactly what we're going to do, but are really close. And so when you go through people's Pinterest pin boards, you can find what they like from a clothing standpoint, what fashion they like, what interior design they like. And I just like to collect really funny things because I think that's more interesting for me. But it becomes this way that we deal with information. We say, I'm culling through all the input that I have to kind of take a few things and put those up towards the top. And so Pinterest will, they have 2.2 million active users, monthly active users right now. It had incredible growth over 2011. I expect that to proliferate enormously in 2012. I think it's really going to become a big medium. Tumblr has a interesting background. I don't know if you're familiar with it. But Tumblr allows you to kind of to walk that plank, because it can be both a curation and a content generation platform. So you can write blog posts on it, but you can also just take excerpts from pages and share pictures very easily. You're browsing through the web, you can go on there and say, oh, I found a nice pair of shoes on Zappos, and you can share that there very quickly. They've had an interesting year. They had some downtime for periods of weeks. I think they fixed all that now. But I don't know if you've seen The Social Network or read the book, but that was one of Zuckerberg's main concerns when growing Facebook, was never have downtime or we'll lose everybody. And so it's very dangerous to have downtime. So I put Tumblr up there. There's also another one called Posterous. And both of these blog engines become so easy to set your own site up. You can send an email in, and all of a sudden you have a blog. You don't have to go through a cumbersome process. You don't have to go through all this stuff. You can set up a sharing site of your own. Actually meant to reverse these. Instagram had amazing growth in 2011. They grew from 1 million users in January to 15 million users in December. And in both this and the video application I was showing, Vidi, they allow anyone to become exceptional, because they put these filters on there, and I can take a picture of this lectern and turn it into a work of art in 3 clicks. I can add a cool filter on it, I can blur it, and then all of a sudden I can publish it to every social network, and everybody thinks I'm a great photographer. And I'm not. But Vidi does the same thing. I can take videos on my iPhone and add these really cool filters that I was telling somebody the other day. I created a video using Adobe Premiere in '97, and to render one transition took 20 minutes. And now this thing has very sophisticated filters and transitions built into your iPhone, and it's a free app, and you share this information out there. So the idea of content creation makes exceptional the individual with the idea. It allows you to truly explore your art and to become really remarkable. Over the past 3 or 4 years, we've had all these specialists and gurus to come up. We've had organizations to hire consultants to come in and teach them how to use social media. We've had organizations hire social media specialists. And for so long, even back, I remember Katie Granju and I had a conversation in 2008 saying, this is stupid. I mean, it doesn't make sense. It's sort of like hiring somebody to say, they are a Microsoft Word specialist. They know how to format. I mean, really the power of Microsoft Word is the content that you produce. It's not about the way that you can use control commands or not. And so I think that's part of what's going to happen in the organizations. They're going to continue to take this silo of social media specialists and make them part of the functions of the organization. And so business development leaders will be expected and required to participate in social media and get it. And to the second slide there, I think get it or get out. And I think, Josh, I thought of your example at the time when you were talking about giving the car away. There was no social media strategy behind it, but it was able to take wings and grow through that and make its way through channels because of social media. And I think Claris does a really nice job of understanding social media and how to use that channel. A lot of companies over the last 2 years have heard Twitter and Facebook and blogs and figured they needed to be in, and they've set up Facebook pages that they've never visited. They've started blogs that they haven't posted to in 6 months. They have Twitter accounts that have 7-month-old tweets on it, and they never actually engaged, and they kept driving people to the content that they were producing, and they never got back to the point of conversation, which is kind of where we started, in that the whole point of this is to have conversations. The whole point of all of this social media is to get people interested, to give some chill bumps about what you're saying. It's not necessarily about the tools that you use to get there. Typically in a strategy, you want to figure out, hey, I want to reach this audience. Where are they at? I mean, you want to approach it that way. But I think we're going to have a paring down of this massive investment because some companies are spending extraordinary amounts of money on a social media program that is yet to produce $1 for them. And from a business standpoint, they're just going to say, I'm not doing this anymore, or I'm not going to be in business. And so I think what we're going to see this year especially is people to start to question that and either transform their behavior or get out of social altogether because probably they shouldn't have been there in the first place.